This episode is brought to you by my Fertility Awareness Mastery online self-study program. Learn fertility awareness from the comfort of your own home at your own pace for a fraction of the cost. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/mastery for details. That's fertilityfriday.com/mastery. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 405. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I teach women's health professionals how to utilize the menstrual cycle as a vital sign in their practices, and I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Today, I'm sharing the last installment of my birth control series. And in today's episode, we are going to be diving into some of the things that you can do to get your partner on board with charting. Of course, one of the main parts of being successful with fertility awareness methods is to have your partner support, not just emotional support, but to have your partner willing to actually modify his behavior during the fertile window for you to figure something out in terms of how you're going to manage that time. And that really involves his participation and acceptance of this method. And so this can be looked at as a positive or a negative, depending on your perspective. So again, this is one of the reasons why fertility awareness-based methods are not necessarily going to be suitable for everybody, because there are women in relationships with men who are not willing to modify their behavior at all. And so in that case, a fertility awareness-based method where you are fertile for a period of time each cycle may not be an option at all, actually. And so that, again, can be looked at as a negative. And I think depending on the person's perspective or the type of population that a professional is working with, they might look at that as kind of like a big negative, a big con for the method. But many people look at it as a positive. And I know in my life and relationships, I have found it to be positive because it really forces you to put the topic of managing your fertility front and center. So if you're not on contraception and you're using fertility awareness, then that means there are parts of the cycle where you can get pregnant. And so you have to talk about it. You have to talk about that possibility. You have to talk about how you're going to manage the fertile window. Your partner does have to kind of understand what's going on and be okay with it, basically. And the challenge, because for most people, fertility awareness is not something that they're used to. It's not something that they're familiar with. For most of us, until we discover it, we're kind of completely in the dark about this option. And so that makes perfect sense that most of our partners also don't know about it. Now, of course, sometimes it's the opposite. I've had a number of clients who end up finding out about my podcast or joining my programs because their partner put them onto it. So it's not always the case, but I think the majority of the time, you're introducing this to your partner. And so in order to be successful using fertility awareness as a birth control method, you do need the buy-in of your partner. You do need to have that participation and that acceptance. And the good thing is that it doesn't have to look one way or another. So I have some clients whose partners are really, really involved, even helping them to chart and note their signs and symptoms, and other partners who it's just, they understand it, they're comfortable enough, and all they really need is that heads up of when you're in the fertile window and when you're not. And of course, that communication is very important. So today's episode is all about just brainstorming some of these strategies that can be really helpful to help familiarize your partner with fertility awareness and to help him kind of get on board with it. And I suppose the good news is that what I found in the work I've done over all these years is that the majority of the time, the male partners are actually quite open to it. And generally, overall, of course, there's a bit of nervousness. Does it work? Could it be effective, etc., to varying degrees. But ultimately, I think that when it comes to health, your emotional health, your physical health, your cycle health, all of those things, I feel like for the most part, our partners are really wanting to support us in, feeling great. And I think for not all, but for some women, fertility awareness is really what they're going to after having a negative experience on contraception. So I feel like from that perspective, from the perspective of health, many partners are actually quite happy that you found something that works for you. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode.
All right, so let's jump into how to talk about fertility awareness with your partner and how to really gently encourage your partner to get on board when you've decided that you want to start charting your cycles, and especially when you are wanting to transition into using fertility awareness for birth control. I feel like it's a much different conversation when you're using fertility awareness to conceive because it doesn't change his behavior. It doesn't really change your sexual behavior other than the timing of it. But when you're transitioning to using fertility awareness as a birth control method, especially as your primary birth control method, all of a sudden, his behavior likely is going to have to change. And that is really where this conversation and the negotiation and the understanding of all of this comes into play. So I'm going to share some points with you just that I've found over the years that can be helpful, but also to dispel some myths. So the first thing I would say, number one, is to be clear with your partner about why you want to use fertility awareness. And I think that helps to move the conversation into a really human place. Because, your partner is a person who cares about you a lot, or it wouldn't be your partner. And so I think having this conversation, really grounding it in terms of why. Like, why is this important to you? Why is it important to you now? We were fine before. We were kind of doing our thing. Why is this something that has come up for you? Why is it kind of in general? Why is it important to you? And also, like, why now? Why all of a sudden does this kind of front and center? And so there's a lot of different reasons, and those reasons are going to be different for every woman. So for example, you could have experienced side effects on hormonal birth control, and perhaps you didn't necessarily know that the birth control was responsible for those side effects. But after learning more about it and, hearing women's experiences on it, all of a sudden you realize that some of those effects that you had been experiencing were caused by it, for example. So if it's related to the side effects, I think that, so in this conversation, we'll be talking primarily about heterosexual relationships. So when you're partnered to a man, like a female partner to a man, because of course, when you're partnered to a man, then there's all of these implications of sex. You can become pregnant from sex and all of those types of things. So, and then he would have to modify his behavior. So in that scenario, my experience working with women has been a really positive one. And if anything, what I always joke with my clients is that working in this field has given me a newfound appreciation for men. So men, often get a bad rap, not being super supportive or whatever stereotypes we have in our head about these types of things. From what I have seen, the vast majority of the women that I work with, their partners are incredibly supportive and first and foremost, really love them and want them to be healthy and happy. They just want their wonderful, lovely partners to be happy and healthy. And so if they discover that there's something that they're taking that could have a negative impact on their health or their fertility, they're often the first ones to say, get off of it. And I've spoken to many women who it wasn't even their idea to use fertility awareness. It was actually their partner's idea because their partners were really concerned about the negative effects on the hormones and the side effects, and of course, their potential future children with this person. So I feel like to be really clear on the why. So the side effects aren't necessarily the only reason. Not all women have the experience of negative, many women use hormonal birth control and don't report any noticeable side effects. But it could be for different reasons. Perhaps you've just been on it for so long and you're ready to not be. Perhaps you're in a stable relationship and you just feel like, you're not at the point anymore where you have to, you just don't necessarily want to approach birth control in the same way as you did before. Maybe you've been on a health kick. Maybe you've been exercising and eating healthy, and you realize that this is one of the other things that you could do to really optimize your natural hormone balance. Maybe you do know that you want to plan for pregnancy in the future. So maybe you and your partner already know that you want to have a baby next year, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now, whenever it is. But maybe you know already that you plan to have babies with this person, and you really want to find ways to preserve your fertility. Maybe you're curious, what's my menstrual cycle been like? I've been on hormonal birth control for 7 years now, and we don't want to have a baby right now, but we want to have a baby, in the next couple of years. And I just really want to give my cycles a chance to normalize and to see what's going on, and to kind of sort this stuff out well before we are really trying to have kids. So whatever the reason is, or maybe you're just curious, or maybe you have a different health issue and you're wondering if you could glean something from your menstrual cycle. So I'm just trying to give lots of different examples to see if I can hit something that maybe you're thinking of. But whatever it is, whether I've said it or not, whatever your reason is, I feel like this is a really great time to have one of those adult conversations with your partner in a really loving way, and just express why this is important to you, because it's important enough if you're thinking about using fertility awareness and transitioning, it's important enough for you to actually make that change. So there must be a reason. And so sharing that with your partner in a really honest and open way can help, because then it's not this kind of thing in the air. You're actually, this is really why it's important to me. Okay. So number 2, learn the method for yourself. That's really, really important. So one of the challenges that many of my clients have shared with me when they're trying to talk about it is they want to talk about it in like a smart way. Like, you want to be confident about what you're saying. But when you don't know the information yourself yet well, then it's harder for you to come across like in a confident way. So for example, fertility awareness isn't necessarily mainstream. It's definitely a lot more common than when I was growing up and when I was a young woman in my early 20s. But even still, many practitioners will still advise against it, calling it the rhythm method, and that it's ineffective. And so there's still overall very little knowledge and awareness about fertility awareness. So you can't necessarily expect your partner to just jump on board right away, because understandably your partner may be skeptical. And so the first thing to kind of think about is, like a bit of skepticism for a brand new method that they don't know anything about, and maybe they've never heard of, or maybe they just associate it with just, the rhythm method, and understanding that it doesn't have the highest efficacy rate. Yeah. So we have to kind of acknowledge that, like, that is a real thing, and your partner is allowed to be part of this world and not be informed about it. So before you try to get your partner on board, it's really helpful for you to take the time to really understand and learn it for yourself. And what I always talk about on the podcast is that if you're planning to use fertility awareness as your primary birth control method and you're serious about it, like you want to be successful, you really want to minimize the chance of an unplanned pregnancy, you just want to feel really, really confident. It's not necessarily the right method for everyone. I always talk about that. Every woman isn't going to choose fertility awareness as her primary method of birth control. That's why there's all kinds of methods of birth control, because we need to have options. At some parts of our life, it may be appropriate. Other parts, it might not. So we all have to have the ability to make those informed decisions. But if you have decided that it's right for you, in order to be effective and in order to use it confidently, you do have to take the necessary time to learn it. So it's something that you should take seriously, kind of like learning to drive or learning any other skill, like in your job, for example, whatever skills that you needed to learn to do your job. So you had to take a little bit of time to learn those. So inform yourself first so that you can talk about it confidently. Okay. Number 3. Find out how much your partner wants to be involved. And so as you learn the method for yourself, as you start trying to figure out what it's going to look like in your relationship, how you're going to manage the fact that you're not on birth control and there is now this possibility of pregnancy every month. And I should just, as an aside, I find these conversations really, really interesting whenever I have them. The conversation of, like, if I go off birth control, it means I could get pregnant. Because although it doesn't happen, to most women, there is always like if you are having sex with another human being, there is always a chance of pregnancy. There is no method that is 100% effective. it's just not even a real thing. And even sterilization sometimes has like a tiny, tiny, tiny failure rate. So I think that in general, if you're an adult and if you're an adult in an adult relationship and you're having sex with the person, there always has to be that understanding that there is always a chance of pregnancy. So whether you're on the pill or not, women get pregnant on the pill. Efficacy rate of the pill is about 99%, but the typical use is closer to 91, 92%, for example. So just to put it out there. Anyways, so when you're transitioning to fertility awareness and having that conversation, recognizing that there's this very real chance of conceiving because now your fertility is just kind of going about, you kind of have to figure out how much your partner wants to be involved. So like I said, my experience is that working with women is that, their partners are typically quite supportive and open and really just, they want, like I said, they love you. They want you to be healthy and happy. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every single partner is going to want to hear everything about it. Every single person isn't necessarily going to be like writing down your basal body temperature for you on your chart every day or whatever the case is. So it's really helpful to figure out how much your partner actually wants to be involved. So you may be surprised that, maybe your partner really does want to get involved. So that example of like recording the BBT, that's a real example. So one of my clients, she would take her temperature in the morning and her partner would actually write it down for her. For instance, another client of mine, she would actually, I shouldn't say one client because several of my clients have, opted for paper charting. So they'll take their paper charts, they'll fill out their information every day, and perhaps they leave it on their nightstand, or they might even post it up on a wall somewhere in their home, and their partner can actually look at it and see where they are in their cycle. So that works for some relationships where your partner actually wants to play an active role and wants to really understand and know where you are in your cycle and will regularly ask you, was today a dry day or whatever? So yeah, there's that side of the spectrum. But then there's the other side of the spectrum where potentially your partner doesn't necessarily need that level of detail. So perhaps your partner doesn't necessarily need to see the chart itself or the play-by-plays, but perhaps, they just want to have a sense of where you are in your cycle and kind of on a situation basis, like is today a good day or not or whatever. So I think having those conversations and getting a sense how involved that your partner wants to be is helpful, because your partner can be supportive and involved and help you with this process without necessarily knowing every single detail. It's really not necessary. And you might want your partner to be totally involved, but really it's a relationship by relationship, like person by person basis of how you're going to negotiate this in your relationship. So there's no like one way that this is going to look. If you were to talk to 10 different women who are in 10 different relationships with 10 different partners, they would tell you 10 different ways of how they communicate with their partners about fertility awareness. So I think a big part of it is just recognizing, again, like your partner is a person and people have different preferences and things like that. So it's just helpful. This is one of the benefits of fertility awareness, because you can't necessarily avoid conversations. All of a sudden, you're having conversations about how to manage your fertile window. What would we do if the condom broke during my fertile window and I were to get pregnant? Like, how would we handle it? Like these are the adult conversations, frankly, that everybody should be having, regardless of what type of birth control method that they're on. But with fertility awareness in particular, it really highlights these specific areas and in a way forces you to have a lot more conversations and to really talk about this particular area of your life more. So really take advantage of that, but also be respectful of your partner and where they're coming from, and try to get a sense of like what their comfort level is and how involved that they want to be. Because everybody is different. And, you might even find that your partner wants to be more involved than you want. Maybe not. I'm just making a joke. But so figure out how much your partner wants to be involved. Okay. Number 4, take a class. So you won't be surprised to hear me suggest that. But taking a class can be a really helpful thing for a number of reasons. So the first thing is that it actually makes it official. Like it's an actual legitimate thing that you're doing. You're paying money for something, you're, hiring a professional essentially to provide you with information about a specific birth control method that is different. So I think there's a couple of things that happen when you take a class. One, all of a sudden your partner kind of pays attention. They're like, oh, this is like a legitimate, actual, real thing. If you are able to involve your partner in that process, so for example, if you're able to bring your partner along, if you purchase a course or something and your partner is able to watch some of those videos or have some of the materials, like read a part of the book, if they want to. Again, this comes down to how involved your partner wants to be. But many women may be surprised that their partners do want to read and understand it for themselves. One of the things I hear a lot from my clients is like, my partner has a super scientific job. And so he's like super skeptical about this. He wants to see the research and things like that. So taking a class, making it official. And to the caveat as well is that there's a lot of people out there that say they teach fertility awareness. So it's really important to find a certified educator, someone who has actually taken training. It seems like it's super easy, but there's a lot of nuances regarding fertility awareness. There's many different methods of fertility awareness charting. So going to somebody who has actually taken the time to obtain a proper certification, meaning that they were trained in a specific method by a specific organization and also has experience teaching, so that you're getting good information so that you can really benefit from the highest efficacy of the method itself. So of course that's the caveat. But for example, some of the feedback that I've received from my clients is that, they'll take a class and it's not this like 10-minute weekend thing. All of my programs are quite involved. And so whether it's my 10-week group program where you're literally we're meeting 90 minutes once a week for 10 weeks, like that's not a small time investment. That's a significant amount of time that we're spending together. And then we also have our private sessions, or in my 4-month coaching program where I'm meeting with you every other week for 4 months. And we have group sessions as well. And I have an online component. So I have an online course series to accompany the class that you and your partner could watch some of those videos together and really feel informed. And then I send you materials in the mail, and it's a real thing. So I've had many of my clients, respond to me like, wow, my partner was really impressed. He was like, wow, you're meeting with her again? This is a legitimate thing. This is really involved. Like, I see that you're really taking this seriously. And so just by your attitude around it, the fact that you're taking it seriously, you're really informing yourself. I feel like that kind of raises the level of what you're doing in many ways. Now, I know every single woman isn't going to take a class, but I do put it out there because especially if you're having some challenges, especially if your partner is really skeptical, by really taking it seriously, by investing some time and some money and, involving your partner, if to the extent that they want to be involved, that really helps to bring them on board, because then they can really trust what's happening. If they have skepticism as to whether or not it will work, really involving yourself in something like this can be extremely helpful for that. And one of the other aspects of it is that, when you take a class, then you yourself are much, much, much more informed. So, another thing that my clients will say to me is, I've been talking about this for like 20 years almost. 18 years as of the time of this recording. I've been talking about fertility awareness for 18 years. So it rolls off my tongue. I can explain everything. And I've done so many presentations and interviews and episodes and all of that. So I can describe the fertile window and I can describe the hormonal changes and blah, 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 just like easy off the tongue. But you might not be there yet. That's okay. But the more that you immerse yourself in the information, you take a class, you read the book, you take just really the more that you become comfortable with it, then when your partner has a question like, well, what happens in this situation? Or what happens? You're not sitting there like, I don't know. And then, feeling the pressure of bringing this new method and like, what if it doesn't work? Then it's my fault because this was my idea and all that kind of stuff. So, and that's a real concern and a real fear of a lot of women. And it's a real burden then if you're the one that wanted to use fertility awareness and your partner's looking to you for information, but you don't really know your stuff yet. So it really takes off that pressure and it can really invite your partner into it, so that if if you understand fully and your partner understands much more, then the pressure is not so much on you to kind of quote unquote do it right and know everything. So yeah, so that's what I have to say about that. So yes, definitely consider taking a class, kind of taking it to that next level so that you really can increase your understanding, and that will help to bring your partner on board. All right, number 5, decide on the lingo that you're going to use to communicate when you're fertile and infertile. So usually, when you're in a relationship with someone for a long time, it's not like you're going to sit down and have a conversation every time you want to have sex. Well, yesterday I had this much mucus and blah, blah, blah. So today, so definitely it's not like that. Like, it's not this formal thing. So between you and your partner, there might be something that you can do, just a thing that would make sense for you to really clearly indicate which days of your cycle are fertile or not, or like whether tonight is a night with no protection or whatever the case. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. So for instance, some of my clients will have their charts up, like I said, on the wall, and perhaps they'll like put like a certain color, on the chart when it's time to go or something like that. So their partners will know. So that might be something. Something else might just be a word you have or the way you talk about it or something like that. So I'm not super eloquent with things like that. So I might say something like, yeah, if you want to make a baby tonight would be the night. Like I would make a joke about it or something like that. But either way, it's clear that, tonight is a night that, we have to use protection or whatever the case is. So, think about how you and your partner might communicate that, and think about when you want to communicate that. Like, do you want to communicate it like before you start having sex? Do you want to communicate that like midway through? Like, when are you wanting to communicate it? And so I think just thinking it through, and you could even talk to your partner like, okay, so we're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And so how should I tell you? Like, what would be the best way for me to share with you, like when I'm in my fertile window versus when I'm not? So you don't feel like I'm rejecting you or not being clear or whatever the case is. So yeah, so I feel like just having that conversation and thinking about like, what could you say? What could you do? And what is going to be your new lingo so that it's quite clear and easy for you to communicate it. So you don't feel like this burden of having to communicate it because you've already decided like we say this thing when I'm in my fertile window and we say this thing when I'm out of it. All right, number 6, and this is super important. Don't be wishy-washy. Be really clear in your communication and be really honest if you forget a day or if you're unsure of what's going on. So this goes back to that idea of the pressure all being on you, all being on your shoulders, and really feeling like, oh my goodness, I have to do this perfectly. If I screw it up, then, and we, have an unplanned pregnancy, then it's going to be all on me. So part of it is just to kind of like lift off the pressure off of yourself. Fertility awareness, I always say this, fertility awareness is not something that, you shouldn't be organizing your life around fertility awareness. It shouldn't be something that's a burden to you. If you're going to use fertility awareness for the long term and be successful with it, it's something that has to fit into your life. So it's not something that you should be doing backflips and somersaults to try to fit in. It's something that you have to make work for you. And we're human beings and life is real. Life happens. Sometimes you travel, sometimes you forget your thermometer, like whatever. So you have to the first thing to recognize that it's never going to be 100% perfect forever. That's not a real thing. So we kind of have to let go of that perfection and really think about those contingency plans. So what happens if you do forget to check for mucus that day? So, if you're charting your cycles, you have to consider yourself fertile if you forget to check, because if you don't check, you don't know what's going on, etc. But ultimately, if you have a situation like that, don't be wishy-washy with your partner. Be really, really clear about what's happening and be honest. And that will help to build your partner's confidence in the method and also in you, so that you both have a sense that you're fully aware of everything that's happening and that you can trust each other and trust the method and know also what you're going to do when you're unsure or when the signs aren't as clear. And so, in my programs, when I'm talking to my clients, when you're unsure, you wait until the signs match up and you wait until everything sorts itself out and all those types of things. And that comes with, again, taking the time to really learn the method, like understanding what to do when life happens and really taking it seriously so that you're not, if you're taking a risk, because people do take risks, then you both need to know that it's a risk. It can't just be like, that it's a risk, that this is not, because when I say risk, basically, if you're taking a quote unquote risk, like if you're having sex on a day that you didn't check or you don't really know what's going on, that's what a fertile day is. A day that, like any day like that, is a fertile day. So if you're taking risks or those types of things, those are conversations that you need to have with your partner. You can't be wishy-washy about it and all of that. And when you are talking about transitioning to this method or using this method, these are conversations you have to have. Like, what is your risk tolerance? Where do you fall on the spectrum? Are you like at a 0, like no pregnancies at all? Are you at a 10? I want a pregnancy yesterday. Are you somewhere in the middle? What would happen if you got pregnant? How would your partner feel about it? What would you do? What would be the plan? What would be the strategy? These things can change in the moment, but these are conversations that you need to have so that you're really clear in your communication with your partner. So don't be wishy-washy. Be honest about this method if you really want to have your partner on board. Okay, so number 7, have a conversation about how to manage your fertile window. what are you going to do when you're fertile? What are you going to do when the mucus is flowing? How are you going to handle that? So that's really important. And again, it's almost like every single point is like, talk about it, communicate more, communicate again, have a conversation. But it's true. So how are you going to manage your fertile window? This is a serious conversation that you have to have, especially when you're using fertility awareness. So for instance, when you're on hormonal birth control, that often saves couples from using barrier methods like condoms. And, a lot of it's no secret that a lot of people do not like condoms. So a lot of men don't like condoms and a lot of women don't like condoms. And I know a lot of the time we think to ourselves like, okay, it's men, they don't want to wear the condom and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it's women. Sometimes women don't like the condom either. And sometimes condoms are completely acceptable and totally fine, and your partner's 100% on board with condoms. Condoms aren't the only way to manage the fertile window, but you have to figure out how you're going to do that. And you have to talk about that. And you have to try to come to some sort of agreement or understanding that is acceptable to both parties. So whether you're going to use a condom, whether you're going to use a diaphragm or a cervical cap or something in combination with a condom, or, the dirty little secret of I could either say fertility awareness or I could say adult life, is that many couples use withdrawal and then don't really talk about it. But if you're going to use withdrawal, and then you have to talk about what that looks like. So the only time that your chosen barrier method can fail is in your fertile window, because that is the only point in your cycle when you can get pregnant. So if you choose to have sex in your fertile window that is protected and your intention is to avoid pregnancy, you have to really be clear on what perfect use is. Like, what does that look like? How are we going to do this? And you also have to know that when you have sex in your fertile window using a barrier or other type of birth control method, that you're relying on the effectiveness of that particular method, right? So these are just the conversations that need to happen so that you can figure it out. Many women aren't comfortable having sex in their fertile window, even if it's protected sex, because they just don't. Perhaps they're on the zero end of the spectrum and they don't want to conceive. And so if that's the case, then you may consider alternative sex. So you may consider like non-penis and vagina intercourse, but maybe you're having other types of genital contact. Maybe you're having oral sex, or maybe you're doing digital penetration or other types of things. But either way, you need to have that conversation about what you're comfortable with, how you're going to manage it, what you're going to do, and what that's going to look like for you in a way that both of you can feel comfortable about that decision. And this would be a good conversation to have before the sex. So that in the moment, you already have a plan and a strategy for how you're going to handle it.
Just popping into today's episode to invite you to join my Fertility Awareness Mastery online self-study program. If you're looking for an informative and comprehensive DIY option for learning fertility awareness, I've got you covered. This program is the most comprehensive fertility awareness self-study program available. And the best part is you can learn at your own pace in your living room for a fraction of the cost of one of my live coaching programs. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/mastery for details. That's fertilityfriday.com/mastery. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode.
All right. So number 8, share the science with skeptical partners. So the great thing about being in 2018 at the time of this recording is that we've come a long way, and there is a lot of scientific evidence and research and information to back up fertility awareness. It is not a bunch of women just sharing their personal experiences with no scientific information. Studies have been done to demonstrate the efficacy of these methods. And in particular, the most rigorous studies not only tested the effectiveness, but they also ensured that the participants fully understood the method by having them learn from trained teachers who were certified in a particular method of fertility awareness charting. So keeping in mind as well that the statistics are based on women who are informed, and the research studies that have been done are based on women who really knew what they were doing and were following the method. So there is a difference between using the method correctly. When you're using the method correctly, the symptothermal method, so combining your cervical mucus observations with your cervical position and basal body temperature, has been shown to be up to 99.4% effective as a way to prevent pregnancy naturally. And that is when the method is used correctly by people who were trained, women who were trained by instructors who were teaching them a very particular method. So the method itself is highly effective. But of course, if you yourself have not taken the time to learn the method, the user failure, for example, the typical use statistics can be quite a bit lower, just depending on how well, A, you know and you understand what you're doing, and B, what your intentions are. So it's a great question. If you are charting your cycles and you know that you have mucus on a certain day, and you choose to have sex on that day and you get pregnant, that is not a method failure. That is a decision that you made to have sex on a day that is fertile. So anyways, share the science with skeptical partners. Like I said, many of my clients have partners who have like that big science background and want to see the research. Well, fortunately, there is research. So it's not like you don't have to, it's not like you have to kind of take someone's word for it. Like you can actually have an adult discussion about it, and you can actually show the supported research and information. So I'll link to the study that I mentioned in the show notes page so that you have that one under your belt if you need it. Number 9, share the benefits of using fertility awareness. So we've talked so much about the challenges and different conversations to have and how to kind of organize all that, but talk about the benefits of it. For example, going back to the why part. So whatever the reason why you wanted to do it, whether it's that you were having side effects, whether it's that you used hormonal birth control and lost your libido and sex was painful, or you weren't even that interested in it and you didn't even notice until you came off of it and all of a sudden you had this crazy sex drive. So talk about the benefits. Many, many women come off of hormonal birth control and gradually regain their libido and actually have a newfound love and appreciation and enjoyment of sex. Not only do many women regain their libido or experience an increase in libido, but many women will find an increase in actual sexual satisfaction. So meaning potentially they start having orgasms more regularly, or the orgasms that they have are more intense. And not that you're going to come off the pill on Thursday and experience these things on Friday or anything, but many women experience those types of improvements just in their own sexual experience. So that is a really big deal. And it terrifies me how many women have been robbed of their full sexual experience on hormonal birth control. So for those of you, I know many women will say, I didn't have any side effects on the pill. When I talk about the side effects of the pill, there's a lot of research that shows the physiological side effects. So whether or not you perceived any effects, whether or not you personally thought you had any effects, there were specific effects on every single woman who uses hormonal birth control, particularly combined contraceptives that contain synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. So for example, all women who use combination hormonal birth control with that combination of synthetic estrogen and progesterone experience a severe drop in testosterone, and up to even a quarter of what a woman who's not taking hormonal birth control. So significant drop in free testosterone levels. And that, for many women, affects their libido, it affects their enjoyment, their sexual satisfaction. And for some women, it even causes sex to be uncomfortable or even painful. So one of the benefits that many women experience when coming off of birth control, sometimes it takes a little bit longer for the libido to return, sometimes it returns a little bit quicker, but it's that full experience, full sexual experience, full libido. So yay for libido. We could talk about some of the benefits too. And that benefits your partner, because if you have a renewed libido and your interest in sex is peaking, then that's going to benefit the both of you. All right. And then, of course, another benefit would be preserving natural fertility for many women that have other types of side effects. For those of you who are new to the podcast, I've done a pill reality series where I share various episodes of women, real women, who have experienced various side effects on different types of hormonal birth control methods. And so if you head over to fertilityfriday.com/pill reality, so fertilityfriday.com/pill reality, you can listen to all kinds of episodes with women who've been on all kinds of different types of birth control methods, and they share their experiences. So some women experience chronic yeast infections on hormonal birth control. Some women experience, bleeding on different types of birth control. So they're bleeding a lot and having lots of spotting, particularly with certain types of IUDs, for example. Some women experience feelings of depression and anxiety, and even they feel like they're a different person, like they just turn into a person who that in their own words, this is not me saying it, but many women have reported that they just feel like a different person. They feel more anxious. They feel more critical. They're having more fights with their partner, and then they come off and they don't feel that way. So again, every woman doesn't experience these negative effects, but if you're thinking about transitioning from fertility awareness, many women do that because they did have negative effects that they did not want on the hormonal birth control. And so focusing on the benefits is a great way to just get your partner on board, and also to just, remember, why am I doing this? And why is this important to me? And what are some of the benefits that I'll have from kind of sticking to my natural cycles and my natural hormone, fluctuations and things like that. And also, if you're planning to have a baby in the future, think about the benefits of that. So by using a non-hormonal method that does not interfere with your menstrual cycle, that does not interfere with your natural hormone production, you, in a way, are preserving your natural fertility, and you're allowing your cycles to, normalize post birth control, so that when you're ready to conceive, you're more likely to just do that when it's time. So, hormonal birth control methods are associated with a temporary delay in the return of your normal fertility, which means that there is a period of time where your fertility is suppressed. We all know that some women come off of hormonal birth control and get pregnant right away, but it doesn't happen for all women, because there is, in the literature, a very clear temporary period of suppressed fertility coming off of it. And that period can last anywhere from 6 months to 18 months or more. And you don't necessarily know how long it's going to last for you. And also it depends on the type of birth control you were using and for how long, and all of those different factors, and what your cycles were like before you went on them, et cetera, et cetera. So, coming off of hormonal birth control, using fertility awareness, one of those benefits is that you can be working on your cycle and working on preparing for pregnancy years before you ever intend to get pregnant. So these are some great benefits of, transitioning to this method that you can kind of incorporate into your conversation with your partner. All right. Now, number 10, we made it all the way to the last point. Be patient. It'll take time for your partner to be comfortable. So for instance, when I'm teaching women to chart their cycles, there's a natural progression that we go through as women. It takes us some time before we actually feel completely confident in the method. And so in my experience, when you're actually working with a trained instructor, it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 cycles for you to really gain that confidence. And that's for a couple reasons. One, because this is not something you can learn entirely from a book. So just like you can't learn to drive from reading, you can't really learn to chart your cycles from reading. Like, you can learn a lot about it and prepare yourself, but the real learning takes place when you actually chart, when you actually check your mucus, try to figure out what you're seeing, write it down, when you actually try to figure out how to identify when ovulation is in your cycle, and you try to figure out how to confirm the length of your luteal phase. Like, just by actually doing the work, that's how you learn. And by actually getting, charting your cycles to the point that you feel confident in what you're seeing. And then actually, if you're using the method for birth control, having sex on your infertile days, and then actually seeing your period come and recognizing that the method actually works. So this is a process, is what I'm saying to you. So if you are going to take a little bit of time to become fully confident in the method and comfortable using it, then you have to expect that your partner will as well. This is just a natural of this process. And so if you're, you want your partner to just be on board immediately, it's frustrating you that it's taking your partner some time to be comfortable, just, remember that it is normal. This is a new thing. With any new thing, it's normal to have some skepticism around it. It's normal to have questions. It's normal to be concerned. It's normal to have doubts and fears. And so just like you have yourself, you have these feelings as well. Your partner is going to have these feelings as well. And so recognizing that this is a normal stage of the process, and being patient and kind, and really taking the time to kind of think about the other 9 steps that we went through already, finding ways to educate your partner, helping your partner to feel more comfortable and confident, legitimizing the method in various ways, and just taking the necessary time to introduce your partner into this kind of new way of thinking about fertility and the menstrual cycle and the body and pregnancy and birth control. Like, this is a completely new area. So recognize that it will take time for him. But I also want to remind you that my experience has been that, the vast majority of women that I see, their partners are quite open to it. Sometimes it takes them a little bit of time to come around. Sometimes they don't get it right away, and it takes more time to understand it. And sometimes, even if your partner gets it, other friends or family members will completely not be on board at all. And so just recognizing that this is a process, and between you and your partner, it's up to both of you to figure out what's going to work best for you. So that brings me to the end of my list. So let me just go back through, and I'll just kind of recount all 10 steps. before we wrap up today's episode. So these are just my most helpful advice, information, just from my experience personally and also working with women over the years of how to help your partner feel more comfortable and confident when you're transitioning to fertility awareness, like how to get your partner on board. Okay, so number one again was be clear about your why. Why do you want to use it? And have that conversation with your partner. Number two, learn the method for yourself. Inform yourself so that you can talk about the method confidently when you're having conversations about it. Number three, find out how much your partner wants to be involved. Yeah, determine, does he want to be charting with you or does he just want a heads up when it's time? Number four, take a class. This is a good way to make it official. Invite your partner to join if they're open to it, but really think about how can you take this to the next level? So you're giving some legitimacy, making this official and really showing your partner like, no, this is a real thing. It's like actually a real thing. You might not have heard about it, but it's real. And this class proves that. Number five, decide on the lingo that you're going to use when you communicate your fertile window. Figure out your shorthand with your partner to make it really, really easy to communicate in those moments when we're going to have the sex. Number six, don't be wishy-washy in your communication. Make sure that you are honest if you ever miss an observation or if you are unsure of what you're seeing. Maintaining an open line of communication with your partner is going to help to ensure that your partner is on board and really trusts you and that you can really have that mutual trust for each other when adopting this new method of birth control. Number seven, have a conversation about how to manage your fertile window. What are you going to do on your fertile days? How are you going to, manage that fertile window? And also have that conversation about what to do if the method fails. Like, what would you do? Have those adult conversations with your partner. Number eight, share the science with skeptical partners. So really, this is, we're not in 1920 here. We've got tons of research to verify the efficacy of fertility awareness and to really understand the science behind how it works. So really share that information with skeptical partners to help bring them on board so that they can really recognize this is a legitimate, actual, real method that is highly effective. Number nine, share the benefits of the method. So really focus on what the benefits are. You talked about your why you want to do this. So what are going to be some of those benefits of actually adopting this method? And there are many. And number 10, be patient. Recognize that it'll take your partner some time to get comfortable, just like it will take you and just like it takes any of us when we adopt a new skill or do something new. So make sure to be patient with your partner. And with that brings us to the end of this episode.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/405. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode all about getting your partner on board with charting and helping your partner to become more familiar with the method, feeling more comfortable about it, and just some of the things you can do to build his confidence. So I do think it is a really important step in getting your partner comfortable is for you to be comfortable, because if you don't feel comfortable explaining the method in a confident way and an intelligent way, then he will feel less confident. I think that's just logical. So having the first step being to really get your confidence level up, and then considering seeking support. I've certainly had a number of clients who, when their partners see the degree of information, books, I sent books in the mail, there's all kinds of things going on, and you realize like, oh, this is a real thing. This isn't just some like fringe movement on the side, which is circa 1925 rhythm method kind of stuff. No. It's actually modern. There's lots of tech. And I think especially these days with the variety of devices. So certainly I do have my own perspective on some of these devices. I think that they should be a good secondary to your knowledge, which should be primary. So that's of course my opinion on that. But ultimately having tech and having all these devices and things like that, I do feel that for many men and women alike, that it does lend credibility to the method itself, because you realize that it's a real thing. There's research behind it. There's companies building tech for it. There's, a variety of devices, tracking, all those kinds of things. So I do think that it does help to build that confidence when you really see like this is a whole industry. It's real. There's definitely a lot going on here. And it's also really helpful to know that it's evidence-based, there's science behind it. I know I have a lot of clients who mention that their partners are kind of really in that sciencey background and things like that. This is something that's come up a lot in my client work. And there's a real assurance there when you can provide real data, real science, real research, real studies to show that no, this is like not just someone's brainchild. There's biology behind it. We've got chemistry, like we've got all this incredible science to back up this method and the efficacy and things like that. So hopefully this episode has given you some ideas, some talking points with your partner, and some additional confidence in presenting this as a legitimate method of birth control, especially if you've struggled with hormonal methods or are just looking for a more natural approach to fertility. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.